Gosh, looks like I got a couple of people out there. If anybody wants to join me, shout out some questions. I got the comment line open, as they say in the business, all right? If you don't know me, I am Dave Nelson, and I am doing another of our industry cooking happy hours, okay? Where I kind of drink a little bit and I sit in my kitchen here and I lay down culinary knowledge, okay? Just basically kitchen survival skills or superpowers or whatever you want to call them. That's what I do. It's not about recipes. It's about laying down techniques. I want to talk about what's behind the recipe 99.99% of the time. Not really a guy who's, into clipping and sharing recipes and things like that. I figure the internet's got plenty of that stuff rolling around as it is, and they don't need another person clogging it up just with more recipes. But I do want to have those deeper conversations about what's going on behind the scenes in every recipe. I'm talking about the technique behind those recipes. And today, the technique that I'm going to be laying down is puree soup technique. There is a snap of fall in the air. I love it. And so I have been just kind of on pins and needles all day thinking about, hey, a butternut squash puree soup, it's warm, it's soup weather, right? I'm going to throw down a couple of little mini grilled cheese sandwiches to go along with it. It's going to be a super, super simple soup. It's not about butternut squash soup so much, though. It's really about any puree soup you want to make, whether it's a potato-leek puree, the vichyssoise, right? Right? Or a black bean soup is a puree soup. Split pea soup is a puree soup. Any starchy vegetable that you can cook down and puree into a soup-like consistency, add a little broth, add a little cream, what have you, right? That's basically the puree method. And so any puree soup, it goes by one method, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's real simple. There are a few variations among different ingredients, but nothing you can't handle and nothing you are going to mess up. Okay, so before we get to that, I did want to remind you that Industry Cooking Channel is made possible with a generous endowment from the VMillerMeats Consortium. And VMillerMeats, they're laying down meat, all natural meats, and a whole beast butcher model over there on Folsom Boulevard. They're at 48th and Folsom Boulevard. And they've got the holidays coming up. I just wanted to mention that it's not too early to start thinking about that holiday roast, whether it's a Halloween roast or a Thanksgiving roast or a Christmas roast. All the season is coming up, and you want to kind of start thinking about what you're going to be doing. As I said, VMillerMeats offers all natural meats, including or featuring, I should say, right? Featuring Stemple Creek Ranch beef from Marin, Llano Seco pork from Chico, and also the turkeys this year for Thanksgiving. They're coming from PT Ranch. They got some heritage birds from PT Ranch up there in Amador. All of their meats at VMillerMeats are the most local, most natural, most good to eat meats that you're going to find in town. So you really, really do need to come in there, check it out. It's a world of pure meat imagination. Everybody in there is kind of a chef guy, so talk to them about how to prepare it, cook it, what it is, what to do with it, all of that. They love to talk about food in there. So go on in there and hit them up, mention Industry Cooking Classes, and get a 15% discount when you shop at VMillerMeats. And don't forget to tell them old Chef Dave sent you. Why not, okay? That's VMillerMeats. They're at 48th and Folsom. They are new school butchers kicking it old school. And with that being said, I think we're going to start moving into soup work, okay? Before we get into this puree soup, I was going to talk about other soup methods. When I'm breaking down soup for the masses, whether I'm teaching culinary school or whatever it is, I basically break it down into three big categories of soups. You're going to have your clear soups, and that includes things like consomme and broths and all of that stuff, but it also includes things that have stuff in the liquid, like they're a clear broth, but they have stuff in there like chicken soup, chicken noodle soup or chicken rice soup or chicken alphabet soup. You see how it works, right? Vegetable soup. Minestrone soup is basically a clear soup method. You learn how to make one clear soup and you know how to make them all, basically. You just switch up the ingredients. You guys get what I'm saying, right? This is what I'm always always talking about. You learn those base techniques and you can take them anywhere you want to go. So clear soup method, when we're doing clear soup method, it basically works like this. First thing, you need to start with an excellent broth. That's one of the things that's kind of a truism in soup making, and it's one of the first things we teach in culinary school, actually, is stocks and broths, right? And so that kind of shows you the importance of it. The French word for stock is actually fond, meaning foundation. Again, emphasizing the importance of a good, sturdy broth behind your clear soup, right? So that's the first step, is kind of getting a good stock. And I've done a little industry cooking class on that. You can check out my industry cooking channel for videos on that. All right. So once we start with that, step one of a clear soup would be making a beautiful broth or stock. Step two, you're going to sweat out your vegetables. And when you're doing sweating, this is another thing that I try to reinforce in my classes, is when I'm sweating, this is when I lay in my flavor DNA, right? This is what I'm throwing in. If I'm making a curry soup, this is where I'm adding curry when I sweat, right? If I'm making a chili type soup or Southwestern, this is where I'm working those Southwestern ingredients in. Or if it's an Asian kind of a thing, this is where I'm working those Asian flavors in the very beginning when I'm doing my sweating. So I cut up all my veggies. I begin to sweat those vegetables with my aromatic ingredients that are going to build the DNA of that dish, wherever I want to take it. Once I kind of have those vegetables sweated, I simply add broth. I might throw a bay leaf or two in there, right? And then I just bring it up to temperature and let it simmer for, I recommend, 8 to 10 minutes or so, just to really kind of blend flavors. You know, you do want a little simmer time to kind of pull flavor out of a bay leaf or a little thyme sprig or something that you may have in there, right? So that simmer time is crucial. And once you've got that simmer time down, your soup is basically done. If you have any finishes for this soup, now there are a few things you want to leave out of your clear soup until the end. One of those things would be a starchy item like pasta. I don't want to add pasta or say rice or something into my soup like that. Those starchy ingredients, I don't really want to throw them in until I'm ready to serve. That's really, I'm going to get the best pasta that way, the best bite. I'm sure most of you have tried that, like minestrone soup out of a can where the pasta is just like dead, right? So adding pasta and rice and things like that right when you serve it. Things like your meats too. If you have chicken or sausage in your soup or something, I like to hold that separate and then add that in just as I'm serving, right? Piping hot broth over the meat as I serve. Whoa, excuse me there. I'm going to move a pot. So final step in the clear soup, you've added your finishes in there. You're going to adjust seasoning and consistency. It might need a little more broth. It might be too brothy. Hey, maybe you need a few more ingredients in there to kind of make it look right? But season the soup, and in order to season it, you've got to make sure that you're tasting it, right? This is something I always talk about, right? So that's basically clear soup method, start to finish, right? You know, sweat out your veggies, chop them all up, sweat them up, add your broth, bring it up to temp, adjust your seasonings, and go, right? You can sell it, okay? The next soup was cream soup, and I did a little class on cream soup. So with the cream soup method, we kind of begin teaching cream soup by teaching a French sauce called a velouté, and it's basically, we have to start with what's called a roux, okay? And you'll cook out flour and fat together in a pan, and you'll set that aside, and then you'll get a flavorful broth, you know, like a chicken broth, a white broth or something like that to make a velouté. And you'll add this flour fat mixture called a roux into that liquid, and it'll thicken, right? And once you thicken it, you can puree vegetables into that, like broccoli or something like that. Chop up a bunch of broccoli, throw it in a velouté sauce and simmer, and then puree that up. Finish with a little cream, and that's cream of broccoli soup. You want asparagus? Guess what? You chop up a bunch of asparagus, throw it in a velouté sauce with, again, roux and white stock, right? That is your velouté, and then you bring it up to a boil. Once those veggies are cooked, you can puree that. Another way to do this is to have a velouté and cook off veggies on the side, add that together. And by the way, you can add flavors to your vegetables, right? But you can add those together, finish with cream, puree, and you've got yourself a cream soup. By the way, cream's always at the end, never before the puree. I should mention that. And then Gosh, another way to make a cream soup would be to, perhaps you've got some cream of carrot or something. You'll cook off some carrot and some onions and, you know, flavor, spices, herbs, anything to lay down that DNA flavor, whether it's curry or Cajun flavor or wherever you want to take it, right? Ginger carrot is very common, right? So you will cook those veggies out, and then you'll sprinkle flour in along with the veggies. This is going to make a roux right on top of those veggies. You can do this, and then you add liquid to that, and then that's going to make a velouté sauce, basically with carrot chunks in it. You're going to puree that, and that's a third way that you can make a cream soup. So we tend, in culinary school, we tend to teach you different ways because, hey, sometimes I've got like leftover vegetables I want to make a soup out of, right? And so I can kind of do it with that method number 2, right? But maybe another way is easier, just kind of building the soup from the start. Method number 3 is kind of the way to go, right? So there are different ways to kind of get there, right? Now today you're going to see me do a puree soup, okay? Now a puree soup definition, basically, I should say, is it's basically a starchy vegetable cooked until it is very, very soft. I always say baby food soft, and then you puree that up, and this soup is thickened by the starchy vegetable that you're pureeing into the broth, basically. You can finish these with cream, but with a puree soup, it's technically, it's not really necessary, okay? And so basically that's what you're gonna see here. I'm going to kind of use a butternut squash today. I'm gonna cook it out with some of those pumpkin spice is what we call that, right? I'm going to cook it out with some of those pumpkin spices, okay? And we're going to cook it until it's nice and soft, and then puree it up, okay? I actually kind of started making these puree soups long before I ever really knew how to cook. I was just kind of a flunky cook in some restaurants, you know, and I got this thing in my head, you know, and I was just not going to use that flour in the soups anymore, right? I was calling them hippie soups, right? And so I was like throwing potatoes or just starchy things into the soup so I could puree it in there. And instead of using, I was still calling them cream soups. I didn't realize I was making puree soup, so to speak, right? I was just calling it kind of a hippie soup back in the day, but it's kind of taken me back to my old hippie soup days to make this puree, okay? So let me go grab one thing, and then we are going to get started. No, I think we can get started now. All right, a little scene change there. Let me see if anybody's out there. Any questions? Hey, I got Jim Turknet. Good to see you the other day, sir. Awful nice to see you. Ollie's out there. Hey, I used to work with you out at the Sheridan. I remember that, brother. I remember that. Let me see. Sandy's out there. Tessa's out there. Nice to see everybody. Andy, nice to see you as well. Nice. Okay, got a few people. Richard's out there as well. So, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to do this. I hope you guys are going to stick with me as I do this, because really this is essential kitchen knowledge right here, learning how to make a puree soup. I'm going to be doing a butternut squash today, but you know, we could be talking about beans today. We could be talking about a potato soup or something like that. And I think I mentioned I'm actually going to throw a potato in with this, right? But basically, let's kind of take a look at what we're going to be working with here. Let me get a little sip here. Oh yeah, industry cooking happy hour, folks. I hope you're enjoying, okay? So let me see if we can get over here. Yeah, I think we can do it, okay? You see several spices over here. I've got some cinnamon, I've got some ginger, I've got some clove. I also have a little, let me grab it right here, my little nutmeg grater. That's the word I'm trying to think of. Also, the pepper of the day today is going to be cayenne pepper. That will be the pepper of the day. I have a little bit of onion. I have a few potatoes here that I'm going to use for thickening up the soup, helping to thicken up the soup. And I'm also going to throw in a little bit of apple because it's fall and that apple is going to add a little sweetness. I wanted to add sweetness. I also was thinking of maybe using apricot in there, but I just looked over and hey, it's apples. This is going to be a fall soup. I'm using apple to kind of sweeten things up. You can see I've got a little butter here as well. There's a little bread on the side. I'm going to be serving this with little mini grilled cheese sandwiches, okay? You can see the little face on my bread. It's all sliced up. He looks like a mummy. Let's see. Last thing, I've got a little bit of thyme here, and I'm going to tie that off with a little string. Oh, and also a beautiful little broth that I made yesterday, okay? I have a white broth there, very clear and nice, okay? So those are the main ingredients. I kind of mentioned the whole process of making this puree soup method. It really is just cutting up your vegetables, cooking them down until they're baby food soft, and then adding a little broth to it, cook it on, cook, and then we puree it up, okay? And so that's kind of what you're gonna see. We're gonna lay in our flavors, our base flavors, that pumpkin pie spice. We're gonna lay that in the beginning of this, but really one of the things I wanna do to really get some good flavor on this is to caramelize my onions. I did a French onion soup class before, and we did a little bit of caramelized onion in there, and it really lends a nice sweetness to it. Onions are full of sugar, and we're basically making caramel out of it, right? So it's like onion caramel in the pot. We did this in French onion, and I'm going to start off my butternut squash soup with a little bit of that caramelized onion as well. I'm just going to use kind of a tall little sauce pot, and I'm just going to use a half of an onion. This onion is just going to add some flavor in the dish. By the way, that word potage that I use, right? This is a potage passion party. Potage, that's really just the French word for soup, right? But in America, we tend to think of potage as like thick puree style soup. So this is right up that alley, if you will, okay? I'm just gonna do half of an onion here while I'm talking here. And I may as well show you what that looks like. But there it is, I'll pull back a little. We got a good angle. There we go, that's better. All right, so going back to some different thick soups, there's another style of puree soups that you've all heard of, but you may be surprised. I'm not gonna need that other half of onion, so I'm just gonna kick it to the curb. Bisque, okay? Whenever you see the word bisque, nowadays, it really is more of just kind of a cream soup, but back in the day, a bisque was a rice soup. You would cook a bunch of rice off into the soup and then puree that in there. That was a traditional bisque. Okay, so I'm gonna start warming a pot. We're gonna caramelize an onion, and I've got a clean onion here. But I want to start melting butter, and I'm going to melt a good amount of butter. What is that? 2 ounces of butter there? And I want that good amount of butter in there because I have other ingredients that are going to be added into the mix here, not just these onions. The onions themselves, it doesn't really matter what size or shape I cut these in. Back in culinary school, you know, students would take a bunch of time to cut something perfect when they really just needed to run their knife through it, okay? So I always said the same thing. I don't need it pretty, I just need it fast, okay? And so I'm just gonna let that butter melt in there, and I'm gonna throw in my onions. And these onions are gonna start caramelizing over time. It'll take them a little time, but that's kind of the process. This first step will take some time. Let you watch that. And I'm just going to go for a little bit of color on these guys. But as they're going, I can start working in other flavors here. What am I going to work in? Some of my spices, that cayenne pepper, a little bit of cinnamon, my pumpkin pie spices, my clove. I'm very afraid of clove, okay? I'm going to throw a little powdered ginger in there. And I'm also going to roll with a little nutmeg too, okay? So while that's all, my butter's melting in there, my onions are nicely coated, and they're going to start cooking down. And I think I will knock them apart a little bit. I'm going to be using a wooden spoon for most purposes in the kitchen. And today is one of those occasions. So you know how the onion pieces want to stick together. I'm just kind of knocking them apart. All right. Oh, yeah. Angela's joined us. Beautiful. Very nice. Now, one little thing that's going to help me caramelize these onions is to help cook out the moisture a little bit faster. One thing that'll do that is a little pinch of salt, okay? And so I got my salt in a little container here, and I'm just going to throw that on in there. And now it's in there, and the salt moves into the cell walls, water moves out. I talk about this one all the time. It's osmosis, and that's about as deep into science as I ever get, okay? Just little things like that. I know just enough science to be dangerous. Okay, so while those onions are going, I want to kind of talk about blending spices here. Now, if I just start throwing these dry spices in here, especially like that ginger, I'm sure you guys have seen how spices will clump up in a dish. So that's why we kind of invented sifting. Whenever you see sifting in a recipe or technique, anything like that, we sift to get little bumps out of it and little clumps out of it, but we also sift to blend those spices so they don't clump out when they hit the oil. I'm already starting to get a little bit of color with the butter in there. And I should mention that we're using whole butter in here because that helps us actually get a little browning, and that's what we're looking for. I'm doing my onions on a fairly high heat. I'm going to ease up on that a little bit. I was on 10 there for a while just to get this party started. And now I'm easing back to about maybe 7 out of 10. I'm still pretty aggressive with it. And we're going back to sifting, okay? I'm going to get a little more salt because I know I'll need some. And salt is, I'm going to use that to help disperse my spices. And then I just start blending spices in, okay? So I'm mostly going to use cinnamon here. I'm probably going to do about a ½ teaspoon of that. And I'm just guesstimating, okay? This is just off the top of my head here. And I'm making about a quart of finished soup here. I'm going to go with a little bit of that ginger, and I'm going to just do it into my hand here. And that's about 1/8 of a teaspoon there, just a little pinch, really. I'm going to do about the same amount of cayenne. The pepper for the day is cayenne. Whoa, my cayenne's kind of clumped up there. So again, maybe about 1/8 of an ounce, or I'm sorry, 1/8 of a teaspoon, not 1/8 of an ounce. I'm going to go back to my pot. It's going a little hot. Getting some color there. And it's actually looking a little dark in spots, okay? But that's okay, because if I want to kind of slow things down, I can always just hit it with a tiny bit of water. This is very common. Some chefs will just, they'll go at a really low temperature to caramelize onions, and other chefs will just kind of, like me, will blast the heat and just hit it with a little water from time to time. It kind of melts the caramel, and then we just let that evaporate out, and those onions will continue. Okay, so I just kind of melted all the caramel, probably put a little more water than I wanted, but that's going to evaporate out very quickly. I'm going to crank that again. And you can see the color that it's already getting. This is nice. I want to get my spices going here. So I just put in the cayenne, and the last one I'm going to put in, or second to last, is my ground clove. I'm very afraid of cloves, just the tiniest little bump here, okay? Not too much. I mean, too much clove, it'll give you a brain freeze. Be afraid of cloves. And then I'm going to start going with, I'm going to turn my fire back down to 7. And I'm going to go with some fresh grated nutmeg. This is my pumpkin pie spice that I've got going today. Kind of in that area. If you have some already made, pumpkin spice, you can just use that. But I don't have that. Because I blended all of those spices together with a little bit of salt, they're able to disperse into the dish a little bit better, and they won't clump up. So I'm going to drop those in there. And now while I'm doing this caramelization, I've got my pumpkin spice going in there. And I kind of want to show you, it's actually quite brown already. It's looking really good. And it smells awesome. So I'm going to slow things down because the recipe's kind of getting ahead of me a little bit. There's some more flavor I want to throw in there. I want to get my bouquet in here. So I just turn this thing down to about 3. It's going real fast. Oh, I also got to cut up some more veggies and things. But I want to get this thyme in there. So I'm going to get a little bit of string, and I'm going to just create a bouquet garni of just thyme. Nothing fancy. And that's just going to float around in there. Let me cut that. I'm just going to tie a granny knot. Like I said, there's no trick to this. It's just string and sticks. It's a bundle of sticks. That thyme smells so nice. All right. So the thyme's going in, and that thyme is going to snap, crackle, pop in all that butter. I love that, by the way. It's releasing its flavorful oils, if you will. Its aromatic qualities into the dish, okay? Again, things are kind of on low here. few more little thyme leaves, throw them in. Beautiful, beautiful. And finally, a few bay leaves. I'm laying down the DNA of the dish right now. Maybe 3 bay leaves. We're going to count those when they come out. All right, so next thing I want to do is I wanted a little more sweetness than just the sweetness out of the onion, so I'm going to add an apple. I mentioned before dried apricot. I use dried fruit a lot for my for sweetening rather than just like adding like sugar or honey into it or something. Okay, so I'm going to go top and bottom off of this, and then I'm going to grab a paring knife and take it down the rest of the way. Oh yes, Roberto Reyes, how's it going, brother? Good to see you, man. Right on. Shane's out there. Angela, awesome. I'm going to go around. This cut right here is kind of what we teach in culinary school, is that tournée motion. And I'm just going round and round with this apple, and I'm just going to chunk it up. There's a little brown spot there. I'll trim that. A little bit of glare here. Let me turn a light. Let me fix that. That might be better. I think we can see a little better. Okay, so I'm going to knock these guys down real quick, get the core out. Getting it on out. Funky little core in there. Don't like that. And then, of course, these don't need to be pretty either. I just want them fast. So let me get rid of all of that peel. And I'm just going to go through these 2 times quick. Like that. Like that. And I'm just going to go through them maybe 1 or 2 more times. Because I don't want them pretty. I just want them fast. Right? Because it's just all getting pureed anyway. So I had onion in there. And I had pumpkin spice. I added a thyme bouquet and a few bay leaves. Sorry, let me get that. I added a thyme bouquet and a few bay leaves. And now I think I will turn it on up. Oh, and pumpkin spice. I don't think I mentioned pumpkin spice. There is a little smack of cayenne in there as well. Okay, so next ingredients are my starchy vegetables. Again, the definition of a potage or a puree soup is starchy vegetables are the thickening agent for this, right? And so I'm going to knock in a few potatoes, and I'm going to knock in a little bit of butternut squash. I think I'm going to do the butternut squash first because I think that takes a little bit longer to cook, okay? But we're going to cut small pieces of this. Now, I should mention butternut squash. I could have roasted this off. I get a little caramelization on the outside and everything. It's very, very nice, but I don't necessarily need to roast it off. This is just a very quick and easy way to get a squash soup done just right in a pot. I can cut it up very, very small. I can get caramelization in the pot to simulate roasting. And you know what another thing I can do is to simulate roasting my butternut squash? Caramelizing onions. Yeah, you got it, right? That's going to give me that same caramelized flavor. I'm stirring around the onion and apple. And you can see I've kind of knocked off the top of my butternut squash, and I'm going to save the rest of that for other purposes around the house. You never know when you need to prop up furniture or something. Okay, so with this one, I'm going to kind of peel it very similar to how you saw me peel that apple. I cut off the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to go straight down. I think I'll use I'll try this. Yeah, that's too small. I'll use the big guy. But I'm just going to go around the world going top to bottom, peeling it like that. Again, you could roast this squash off and then scoop it. And put it right in with some onions and things like that. Notice how I started in the pot. I start things cooking. Hey, if it gets ahead of me, I can turn that pot down, but I always get cooking first. You know, you always see the cooking shows. Everything's all cut up ahead of time. That is not how I work in a restaurant, right? I get something on the fire. It's got to start cooking, and then I'm cutting up the next ingredient, right? I talk about this all the time. It's called feed the kitty, right? Keep putting the next ingredient in the pot while you're cutting the one that's following. All right, so I got a big old chunk of butternut squash. These don't have to be pretty either, okay? So I'm just going to do long slices. And we're just gonna chunk these up. See how thin they are? Those are gonna cook up super fast. This is gonna be a fast soup. And I got some nice caramelization in there. So it's gonna kind of give you that roasted kind of essence, if you will. Caramelized. Oh, it's actually quite delicious. It's a taste that can't be beat. Cutting through these dudes. Squash is chunky, and you don't want to eat it raw. Again, these small pieces will cook up very quickly. And this is definitely one, especially in the autumn, but you know, back in the old restaurant cookie days for me, when I was a cook, you know, butternut squash soup was just something I could easily crank out. I'll tell you, getting into like acorn squash, I never like getting into that. It's hard to get in the little nooks and crannies. That's when I'd prefer to roast off and then peel. So these squash pieces, I've got no room on the board, so I'm going right in the pot with about half of them. Now that I got all that mass in there, I'm going to crank up the heat a little bit. I'm probably back up to 7 out of 10. And I'm going to cut up the rest of this squash real quick. You can kind of see my hand position. I've done a few videos on knife skills. Blades of Glory, very popular. Check out Blades of Glory on Industry Cooking Channel on YouTube. We got lots of videos over there. So I just added in a bunch of squash, and I am just going to let that pick up a little bit of color in the bottom. I'm actually going to, yeah, it wasn't quite up to my 7, okay? It's still on 7 out of 10. That's where I am. Let's see who's out there. Chat, hey, thanks for showing up. Thanks for checking it out. Got a few people. It's fall. I just love it when the seasons change. I love this. So glad, I said it earlier, so glad the summer's over. I hope the fire season is truly over. Let's all hope for that. Okay, so you can kind of see everything in there. Not super exciting. While that's going, I've got one other thing, one other starchy vegetable to cut up, and this is just going to kind of help. It stabilizes the soup a little bit. I feel like the starches in the potato, let me get this down here. I feel like the starches in the potato thicken more effectively than just the squash does. So I'm going top and bottom off of these. I could have used my paring knife to do that. And I'm going to use that same kind of tourne motion, long, smooth strokes, using your paring knife, using your thumb as the cutting board, basically. And that's how I peel veggies. And you get a really big, strong muscle right there. Oh, yeah. Okay, so there's a potato. These are just little guys. And again, it's just, I'm not measuring anything. I'm just throwing a little extra starch in the pot by adding potatoes. I was kind of talking about hippie soup a little while ago. This potato has a little russeting on the interior. I'm going to shave that down a little more. Kind of funky. I'm going to get rid of those peels today. I want a nice clean looking soup. I'm going to give this a little stir, guys. Whoa! Bad chef. I got squash. There's a few pieces I saved right there. They're still good. Going down, and let me wash my hands. Oh yeah, we're having fun. Industry cooking classes. We are throwing down another Monday happy hour. Getting in the fall with a pumpkin spiced butternut squash soup. But what we're really doing is we are teaching the puree soup method. That's what it's all about. I keep spilling squash. Squash is flying. Okay, potatoes, I'm going to cut them up. Nothing fancy. I think I'll switch back to my chef's knife. Maybe one long. And across. One long and about 5 across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sure, close enough. Okay, potatoes going in. You better believe it. There they go. I got just about everything in that pot that I need. So while I was kind of cleaning those potatoes, some of that squash was picking up a little color on the bottom too. I think I would like to develop a little bit more of that color. So
before I add liquid here, I could add the liquid here and let it start steaming everything. But before I do that, I want to get a little more of that caramelization and that roasted flavor on that squash. So let's let it do another little round. I'll leave it alone, and we're going to let some color develop in there, okay? Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, we are doing it. And once this is all together, I think I'll kind of just make some grilled cheese sandwiches on the side while we're waiting for this soup to be done. It doesn't take long to cook all these veggies. They're actually cooking right now. Once I get the liquid in there, we'll really be cooking. I don't want to touch it. I'm very tempted. You can tell I got the spoon in my hand, but I don't want to touch it. I want to get some color on these. Step away from the squash, Chef. Step away. Somebody's talking out there. Diane, puree soup, first month of culinary school. Oh, yeah. All right. Talking about the old culinary school days, huh, Diane? That's awesome stuff. Awesome. Awesome. Very fun. I did my culinary school at that big fancy one back east in the CIA upstate New York. And I tell you, it was like a 2-year-long cruise. I was eating very well while I was there. So I want to show you, I've got some, whoa, there you are. There you are. There you are. I got some color up in the corner of that pot, okay? It's getting a little darker than I want. And I'm going to go ahead and just work a little bit of broth into that corner, because broth is the next ingredient, okay? So far, we have onion and butter. We added a little pumpkin spice to that. I just put a little broth in there. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of cleaning that up. I've deglazed that corner. It's hard to do, hard to hold up. Kind of deglaze the corner there. There it is. And I'm scraping it with my wooden spoon. We love wooden spoons in the kitchen, okay? See how I just kind of cleaned all that up? That's going to be flavor in my soup. And I don't see any more of that browning in there. And so I think I've gotten all the darkness. Let me get you back up here. I think I've gotten all the darkness I'm going to get out of that caramelization because I just added a bunch of liquid. So I'm going to add a little bit more, and we're going to allow flavors to blend. Now this is I put in 1 cup so far. This is a 1 cup ladle, 2 cups. In professional kitchens, we just have different sizes of ladles around. Those are our measuring cups. 3 cups right there. I said I was going to make about a quart of soup, and there's a bunch of veggies. There's about a cup worth of veggies, if not more. So it's going to yield about a quart of soup. I did 3 cups of broth and about a cup and a half of veggies. Nice. So right now, here, I dropped the squash. Trying to grab that out of the fire. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start getting a grilled cheese Sammy rolling. Okay, so right now I'm just waiting for the soup to come up. It's just now starting to simmer around the edges. Maybe I'll give them a little stir. Let me slow things down here. And let's just get them up to a really good boil here. And then we'll start a grilled cheese sandwich, I think. Oh, yes. I am feeling pretty good about this soup. It's coming right along. Oh, yeah. CIA was a wonderful, wonderful school. Diane's commenting on CIA. Every day, the breakfasts were spectacular at the CIA. They were teaching a breakfast class, of course, right? A 6-week or a 8-week breakfast course, and every day a different menu, and it's omelet stations. It's a different type of pancake every day. It's a different stuffed French toast every day. It just goes on and on and on. Different themes every day. It was an amazing experience. And then there were, I think, 8 restaurants on campus when I was there, and you know, we're out in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes it's the frozen winter. You know, they need people in those restaurants. Who's going to go? Just the students, right? These are world-class restaurants. They really were. And they didn't just teach us how to cook at the CIA. They taught us the dining experience. They taught us they taught us table manners and etiquette. We had to go to nice restaurants a couple of times a day. We'd go to a restaurant at dinner as well, right? And sometimes the restaurant, the Italian restaurant there was, they said it was 11 courses, but it was really more like 14 by the time you were done with it, right? So try and sit through 14 courses of a meal and then show up to culinary school after that and try and keep your head in the game. It was quite an experience. Believe me, I'm not complaining. All right, so I've got a good strong boil on my pot. And I'm gonna go ahead and pull a little switcheroo here, okay? I got a cast iron pan and I am firing up a different burner in the back here. So you guys can see my soup's going in the back. I'm gonna get that going to a boil there and then start turning it down. And then I'm just starting to get the heat, the cold out of this pan right here. And I'm gonna start making some grilled cheese Sammies, okay? Just simple ones, nothing fancy. I'm not putting butter on them or anything, but I am gonna cook them in bacon fat. And I just bought some bacon fat the other day at Taylor's up the street. And I don't want to put it in the pan when it's super hot. When we're doing a grilled cheese sandwich, it's kind of a low temp thing. So I'm just melting a little fat, and my flame's going to be on about 4 out of 10 here, maybe. I'm not trying to get it super hot right out of the gate. Need a little more fat there. And we need enough fat to kind of soak into the bread. We're really kind of just frying this bread. My soup over here is going a little too hot and heavy. Let me kind of show you what that looks like. It's just really angry, okay? So I'm going to turn that down. And I just want to simmer, a strong simmer. I want to cook that stuff down sooner rather than later. So that's a good strong simmer. You guys see that? It's pretty good. Awesome. Okay, I think I'll turn up my pan a little bit more on this grilled cheese sandwich, okay? Now, I sliced up my bread. I just did really thin pieces of a whole wheat sourdough that I do around here. And then I want to bust out. I'm just going to do a cheese, just, you know, domestic or Tillamook cheddar. All right, Diana's out there, beautiful. Let's see, and I gotta say a little commercial here. If you don't have a cheese slicer, you need to get one because these are awesome, okay? I'm actually gonna do the thicker slice on these grilled cheese Sammies, like so. And I only need about 2 pieces per each one. My soup's bubbling along over there. And we are talking a pretty nice autumn dinner with very few ingredients in there. I was going to do 3 sandwiches for a grand total of tiny grilled cheese sandwich and a half for everybody. Maybe I'll do a few more slices here just in case. And there it is. I think I'm going to put this back and I'll have it if I need it. I'm going to give my soup a little stir here. And while I'm doing it, I'm just kind of feeling the vegetables in there. I'm just kind of poking them. They're really not doing much. I'll let you see what the pot looks like here, right? I'm feeling that they're still firm. I'm cooking this stuff until it's like baby food, okay? So it's going to be another 8 minutes or so, I think. Don't quote me on that. This is not a guarantee. All right. All right, so it looks like my pan's getting a little hot here for my grilled cheese Sammies. This is another one that where butter helps you get a little browning too. Now, an important thing with sandwich making, here's a thing, right? You want to keep your slices in order and then take 2 slices at a time. And then when you're making your grilled cheese or whatever it is, open it up. So when you put it back together, it's the same 2 slices of bread and it always matches, right? You don't want to space out your bread. So I want enough, I'm probably going to do 2 sandwiches right now. Again, when those go back together, they're going to fit perfectly. It's a thing. Oh boy. Let me do this. Now they fit. All right. So I'm just laying cheese down on one side. And the inside doesn't have to be pretty. Little mini grilled cheeses. Checking the flame. We want them to take their time. And I'm actually going to put them back together and I can fit this last one in there. Maybe. Oh yeah. I think I need a little more of that fat. Really, these grilled cheese sandwiches? Giving me something to do while my soup is simmering over here. I'll be honest, guys. Let's see who else is out there. And hey, Scott Durbinay, good to see you, sir. Nice. Very nice. Got some of the old crew out there. It's always good to see the old students. And I just dropped in my last breads. And I'm just getting a little grease on one side, a little bacon fat, I should say. And then I'm going to assemble them and I want to flip them. I want this to take its time so everything gets melted. And I got plenty of cheese left over. I'm going to give my soup over there a little stir. And potatoes are getting soft, but they're not baby food yet. The squash is getting pretty soft because it went in first. The sandwiches are coming along nicely. And we're going to be flipping them with a flexible fish spatula, the industry standard. And I'm just taking a minute to clean up a little bit. There's only one small little project to do that we haven't done yet. Flipping my sandwich, looking beautiful. That one's not quite there. That one's about there. The last thing I want to talk about is I'm just going to do a little yogurt drizzle over the top of this thing, okay? I have just a little spoonful of yogurt. We did a taco night last night, and we'll buy yogurt instead of sour cream, right? We like that Greek yogurt instead. So I just have a tiny little bit, and I was just going to make a little yogurt drizzle on the top of it. Now, very common, you'll see people, excuse me, let me get a little sip here. Get a little sip. It is happy hour after all. But many people will use cream or milk to thin out their yogurt. But when you do that, there's a culture in that yogurt, and it's going to kind of set up the cream and milk you add in there. So in 20 minutes or so, it's going to be set up like yogurt again. So I tend to thin this with water. I'm going to stir it up first and just put a tiny little drop in there and then stir it, and then a tiny little drop. Whenever I've got something thick and I'm adding something thinner like Greek yogurt and water, I add small amounts of liquid, smooth it out, then the next amount of liquid. If I dump all the water in there, it's going to be clumps of yogurt floating around water. It's really hard to smooth out. So it looks like this, okay? And I know it's just a tiny bit of yogurt here. It's like a tablespoon of yogurt, basically. A few drops at a time. Thin that out so the yogurt is lighter. And then you can add more of that thinner ingredient. So many recipes depend on this. Let me flip a cheese sandwich here. I think one of them is about done. No. Oh, yes, that's beautiful. Oh, yes, we're fine. We're fine. My soup's going great over there. And I think I've got all the heavy stuff smoothed out, and it's a little bit softer now. And I'm just going to go in a few more drops. Stir it in. Also in this yogurt, I think I will add I usually add a little salt. I don't just put the plain yogurt on there or plain sour cream. I will usually season that stuff up a little bit. Maybe even put a little citrus zest in it for a taco bar. Pretty good. Okay, now I've got something that's pourable that I can pour onto my soup. And since it's not, you're not adding another dairy product to it, it's not just going to set up another culture in 20 minutes. It'll be this consistency for a little while, okay? So let me just set that aside, and we'll drizzle a little of that on the plates. Oh, it's all coming together. I'm betting these vegetables in the soup are pretty darn close here. They need to be really, really soft. Yeah. Let me wipe something here real quick. I think my sandwiches are essentially done, so I'm just going to kind of kick them off the fire. They look pretty okay. Okay. So grilled cheese Sammy's on the side. It's going to be beautiful. Okay. And I'm going to move my my project back over towards everybody. And we're getting ready to puree this soup. I want to just bring a little bit of it out. I just have the spoon sitting on here. I'm going to use my spatula for this. And let me just show you, that squash is just like baby food, right? the potato is just smashing up, okay? This stuff's just gonna puree nicely into the soup, okay? And so that was my test. It looks like things are about there. I'm just kind of scraping things back in. And I'll set that aside. And I need to start pulling things out. Actually, let me pull that back. Bad chef. I'm gonna pull out my time spray. So there it is. Maybe kind of knock off the deliciousness there on the side. I'm gonna pull out a few bay leaves. There's one, there's two, and there was a second one attached to that. So there's the 3 bay leaves I put in. And I don't see anything else that's a big red flag like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start pureeing this up. Now, the best possible thing to use is a blender. But for me, I think what we can use here is gonna be our stick blender. That's all I can kind of fit over here. I don't have a lot of power cords, and I think the blender is just gonna take too much space. So let me move a few things. I'm gonna bring my blender over. And this is a super thrash blender, guys, but it has been with me many, many years, and it still works better than, I've got 2 other brand new blenders, and none of them work as good as this, so I just keep pulling this one out. It's a Braun from like 1985. It's still going strong. Okay, so, it's plugged in. Let's see if it works. Oh, yeah. Huh. I think it's only 1 speed now. It used to be 2. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the fire off under this, and we're gonna start pureeing. If this gets too thick and it stops pureeing, you need to add a little more liquid, okay? It has to have a little bit of flow in order to puree. And on the other side of that, you don't want it watery, okay? And so, let's get you guys into this, okay? I think you can see. I've tilted it, and so all the liquid's down here, and I want to do an up and down motion as I'm working this. As I do that up and down motion, you can feel a vortex wanting to pull this blender down. It's really sucking the beties in. It's working great. Give it a little stir. You want to keep the tip of this thing, by the way, underneath the liquid. You pull it up here and you're going to be wearing soup, okay? So keep the blade under the surface. Look at the flow. If you don't see flow, if you don't see that flow, that movement in there, you've got to add liquid or it's never going to work. I'm actually really lucky. I usually, when I'm doing these demos, I want it to be something I need to adjust in front of the students, but this is looking very nice. I don't think I need to adjust this. I'm going to pretend to adjust it, perhaps. Wow. I got really lucky on the color here. Whoa. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that blender. By the way, I love that 2-piece feature there. Okay, blender's done. I would normally say if you're worried about chunks, if you want a perfectly smooth one, you might put it through a sieve or a strainer, but caution, do not put this through a fine sieve. I'm sorry, do not put this through a fine strainer because you're not going to have anything left. You're going to have puree, you're going to have butternut squash water on the other end of the process, okay? So, you want the pulp in there. That's what's thickening a puree soup or potage, okay? And so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take another look at the seasoning and consistency. By the way, another word, you may have heard me say this in other shows, this is the best piece of advice I give to any chef out there. The last step of any recipe before you plate, adjust seasoning, adjust consistency. If this is too thick, add a little liquid, stock, broth, water, whatever you got that's going to taste good in there, right? If it's too thin, hey, maybe think about a little cornstarch or something, or adding a little mashed potato in there or some other starchy ingredient, right? That's what's going to thicken this thing up. You got to thicken it up if it's too thin. As far as seasoning goes, you cannot season without tasting. So taste first, and we're usually talking about salt here, but think of sweet. Think of acid, think of fat, right? Things like that. More fat oftentimes will bring flavors out. In fact, let's do that. Okay, I'm gonna add a finish here. This is another step to the process. I'm gonna finish this up with a little butter. I worked a restaurant in New York City, and when we finished the puree soups there, we'd throw them in a blender and hit it with a little stick of butter, just it's called mounting butter, finishing with butter. But we would, whoa, my paring knife went down. It would just make it so nice and frothy, and just finishing with a little pat of butter. It's so delicious, okay? So this is a very common finish called malte au beurre, or mounting with butter. I'm just going to stir in a little bit of butter. Once this butter goes in, there's no more fire involved, okay? So I'm gonna add this butter, and I'm just gonna let it melt in. If this butter stops melting, I will turn the heat back on, but otherwise, this is a finish for us. And as this is melting, I wanna keep it moving. I don't want it to start pooling up in there. If I keep this moving, it blends into the soup. I'm gonna get a tasting spoon, and I'm gonna give it the first taste. We're checking our seasoning right now. Oh man, I'm a lucky guy. Yeah. It's really a bummer. I tell you, I really want to have to make adjustments, but as I taste this, I'm like, gosh, the consistency is beautiful for a cream soup. I don't want it. It's the same consistency, by the way, of my sour cream, or my yogurt, I should say. Let me get rid of this butter mixture. I am nuts about my flavor. This is what I'm going to do, guys. I do this all the time. I do this all the time, okay? I'm gonna pretend to put salt in this, okay? So here you go, pretend, boop, boop. Yes, this is the seasoning time, okay? I just pretended to put salt in there. That's when I would do that, okay? Butter's in there. The last thing I think I will do is plate it, okay? I think I'm about there. I was gonna pretend to adjust stock too, but it's just ridiculous. You guys are adults, you don't need that. So let me pull this on out. And I'm going to grab a different ladle here. And I said it a second ago. When you've got two liquid garnishes, two liquids going together, I've got a soup here, and then I've got a little yogurt drizzle to go on the top. You want both liquids to be the same consistency to avoid bleeding. If one of them is thinner than the other, one of them is going to bleed. So very, very simple here. There's a lot of things that could go on here. But I'm just going to do a little drizzle, because I didn't want to take your whole darn day, people. All right, Lisa's out there. And pretty much the same consistency as that soup. Sometimes I do get lucky, and you just want to do a few little quick motions with it. I'll do another one. All right, that's a little bit more. I would have usually left it with one, but I wanted you to see that again, okay? I got up on the edge with that a little bit. Not my favorite thing. And then, I think to serve this, oh, oops. I'll do that. Oh, sorry, you didn't see that, but I just put a few grilled cheese sandwiches right next to that. And that's my soup today, okay? Now, a few things about this puree soup. I did it with butternut squash today. You could do the exact same thing with like carrots or any other starchy vegetable, sweet potatoes, things like that. But I should also mention bean soup. That's a little bit different process when you're doing this puree soup with a bean. With a bean, sometimes you'll soak them if you're using kind of a larger bean. So you do that overnight soak. I did a bean class. We talked about that. But if you're using like a lentil or a split pea, typically they will do that from dry state. They just put it in the pot because they're so small and you're going to puree them anyway. You'll cook them all the way down. Okay. If you have the bean soup, if you have a larger bean, you will cook those beans until, again, just like this, they're baby food soft. It takes longer to do beans. That's why I did a vegetable one today, right? But you can still teach the technique, right? But you cook those beans until they're baby food soft. You'll strain out about a third of those beans, and then you puree the bean soup, and then you add those whole beans back in. If you've ever had like black bean soup, white bean soup, things like that, you got whole pieces of bean in that puree soup. You have to puree some beans to thicken it, and then have other beans in there as what we would call a garnish, right? And so that would be the big difference. But otherwise, your bean soups work just like that you just saw. Work just like that you just saw, right? It's the puree soup method, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go through it again. We start out by start out with an excellent stock. I should say that for all soups, right? But put that aside for now. We started out by sweating off our starchy vegetables with whatever flavor basis that we want to lay down in this dish. Okay, today I did kind of pumpkin spice with a little bit of spiciness behind it, that cayenne behind it, right? But I mentioned earlier, with curry is the bomb with squash. That's usually what I'm doing around the house. And instead of broth, I'm using like coconut milk and coconut water and things like that for that. It's really delicious, right? So I could take this to Thailand, or I could make an Indian curry out of it or something like that. I could kind of do other things, just crazy things like a little ginger and cumin or something like that is kind of different too, right? So just so many things. The world is your oyster if you just know those cooking techniques. All you do then is kind of look in your cupboard and say, hey, I got a few potatoes. Hey, there's a leek in my cupboard or in my refrigerator, right? I could do a potato leek soup, right? Or something like that. You don't need to have a fancy broth. I could have easily gotten away with either making a quick 10-minute vegetable stock or you just using water, right? But yeah, puree soups. It feels like autumn, baby, right now, just because I did that. If you support what I am doing, my mission of just getting more people off their butts and cooking a little bit, please like my page, right? Go over to Facebook, look me up, join the Facebook cooking community. I got tons and tons of good people over there, and we are all figuring out this kitchen stuff together during COVID, basically. And you can also check out my industry cooking videos at Industry Cooking Channel on YouTube, where I just got tons and tons of these videos. I'm basically rolling through all my old culinary school lectures that I've been doing for years and years. And so that's basically the show today, guys. Okay, I am having a blast doing this. It's keeping me sane, and I really appreciate you guys joining me. Give a shout out. Oh, Russell's out there and everybody. Okay, Scott. Nice. Scott's telling me I just made a really nice dinner for Monday Night Football. Let's get another shot of that, ladies and gentlemen, while I just say there's the soup. It's so beautiful. There's a little grilled cheese Sammy on the side to go along with it. Nothing fancy, guys. I keep it simple. Just talking about technique here, guys. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget that the party is always, always in the kitchen, and don't forget to be true to your food. We will catch you on the next Industry Cooking Happy Hour, ladies and gentlemen. Whoop, whoop.